It's no secret that Tetsuya Nomura is on a mission to repurpose some of the ideas he once had for Final Fantasy Versus XIII into Kingdom Hearts. KH3 introduced a brand new character who will be important for the series' future going forward, Yozora. It became immediately obvious after first seeing this character, along with watching the secret ending of the base game and both endings of the secret episode DLC, that this character isn't just purely a new addition to Kingdom Hearts, but rather a second chance for Nomura to rebirth Noctis and execute those lost Versus XIII ideas. I don't think Nomura has ever been able to let go of his original vision for Versus XIII, as the development team reshuffling and long development hell of the project that would eventually lead to Hajime Tabata taking the director's seat, causing Nomura to step down to focus on other projects at the time, with the game being rebranded to Final Fantasy XV, meant that a lot of Nomura's original vision for the game was lost. This was going to be the very first major Final Fantasy game directed by Tetsuya Nomura, allowing him to create his own ultimate fantasy idea. A fantasy based on reality, something that Nomura had wanted to do for years, and is the exact reason why we're now seeing Kingdom Hearts taking us to a world more of our own with Quadratum. Noctis Lucis Kylum is the main protagonist brainchild that Tetsuya Nomura had created and designed to lead this idea, becoming the third child in Nomura's three main protag characters, a character that became near and dear to him. But because his original vision was never completed, we arrive in 2019 with the introduction of Yozora, a chance for Nomura to reincarnate Noctis, but this time on his own turf with Kingdom Hearts. While we still know very little about Yozora so far, from the small amount of material we do have of this character, it's crystal clear that this guy is Noct 2.0, even without the raw confirmation from Nomura himself. So today, we're going to look at all of the similarities between these two characters. So let's begin with the general design of these characters. Noctis wears a t-shirt with an open overjacket, 3/4 length pants, wearing boots, along with one singular glove. This isn't actually the original design of Noctis, as the initial Versus XIII trailers had Noctis wearing a larger military-styled coat with a very large collar. But this design here would become the one that Nomura would eventually settle on to become the primary look of Noctis. The clothing of this outfit was actually designed by Hiromu Takahara, the lead designer of Japanese clothing brand Rowan. This is actually one of Nomura's favorite clothing brands, as quite often in interviews, Nomura can be seen wearing different Rowan pieces. The emblem that represents the Rowan brand is a skull and crossbones, which has been implemented across the smaller details on Noctis's outfit, whether it be on the buttons, on his t-shirt, on his gloves, or on the back of his pants. So Yozora here takes on almost the exact same general design as Noctis. 3/4 length pants with the boots, an open jacket with a t-shirt underneath. Though the jacket is a little bit more KH-ified than Noctis's, the collar portion, being a lot larger, is definitely more reminiscent of Noctis's original Versus XIII coat. And we also have the large and long open finger gloves, though Yozora wears two. But if you take a closer look at the finer details of Yozora's outfit, you'll start to notice that that skull and crossbones design that is branded across Noctis's outfit can also be found on Yozora's. Now, it is unclear as to whether or not Rowan have any part in the design process of Yozora's outfit right here, or if it's more so Tetsuya Nomura being just such a big fan of this clothing brand that he wants to repurpose the skull and crossbones across Yozora's outfit. But we can see the skull and crossbones implemented in many of the same spots as Noctis's outfit, whether it be on the jacket or on the gloves. What's interesting is the t-shirt. Noctis has a black t-shirt with a bunch of skull and crossbones, whereas Yozora has a V-neck t-shirt. There's no skull and crossbones on his, but you can faintly make out both the Kingdom Hearts heart symbol and crown symbol, only ever so slightly implemented into the pattern of the shirt. Naturally, there are going to be some differences here, as this isn't just straight ripping Noctis into Kingdom Hearts, although it kind of is at the same time. Like, for example, the air stud that Yozora has actually has, for whatever reason, Roxas's emblem on it. Or if we look at the jacket zipper, Noctis has skull and crossbones, whereas Yozora actually has a chocobo charm. I like this because the chocobo could possibly signify the Final Fantasy beginnings of this character. A larger Rowan skull and crossbones emblem can be seen at the back of Noctis's jacket, whereas that larger emblem on Yozora is actually on his shoulders. Yozora's one is unique though, as rather than having crossbones, we've got two crossing keyblades. The skull also has a crown on top with hair that almost depicts Sora's. And also the pant tassels. Noctis's pants have 4 tassels that hang down from the waist, whereas Yozora has the same tassels, but rather they're positioned towards the bottom of the pants. We also can't forget about Noctis's iconic hairstyle. This seems to be an absolute favorite of Tetsuya Nomura's, as he continues to implement this into his already established characters. But at least looking at Yozora here, yeah, it is practically 1-for-1, especially when you see Yozora's design during CGI cutscenes. The only major difference here is that Yozora's hair color is grey versus Noctis's black, though Yozora's hair color likely has something to do with his true identity. Naturally, there are a ton of theories out there, but one of the more prominent ones is a Riku connection. But Nomura can't quite seem to let go of this particular hairstyle, as he's implemented it into other characters like Hope from Final Fantasy XIII, Lan from World of Final Fantasy, even KH4 Sora's design is a little bit reminiscent, and of course, most obviously, Riku's KH3 design. KH3 Riku takes so many design notes from Noctis, it's sort of scary, but it's even scarier when you put both Yozora and Riku side by side, further suggesting there is some type of connection between these two characters. Not just looking at the clear similarities between the two characters, whether it be the pattern on the jacket itself, the number of buttons, but also the base game's secret ending where we see Riku walking past the Tokyo Metropolitan Building in Quadratum, with Yozora sitting right on top of that building looking down over Riku, possibly acting as some form of symbolism. The Tokyo Metropolitan Building is also very iconic to Noctis as well, as it's an important location within the original vision of Versus XIII and even in 15, acting as the citadel of Insomnia City. So because Quadratum is literally Tokyo City, it's not surprising that Tetsuya Nomura would have Noctis 2.0 sitting on top of this building. However, the most obvious sign that Kingdom Hearts is becoming a Versus XIII redemption arc is the cutscene that plays once you defeat Yozora. For anyone that was paying attention to the Versus XIII trailers back in the day, you'll absolutely recognize this cutscene here of Yozora sitting in the car, as it is quite literally, frame for frame, the exact same cutscene that plays during 2 earlier Versus XIII trailers. And this specific sequence of Noctis sitting in the car was never used in the final version of Final Fantasy XV. This has become one of the most iconic scenes of the original Versus XIII and has been completely recreated frame by frame here in Kingdom Hearts. Honestly, this is really the only piece of evidence you actually need to understand what Tetsuya Nomura is doing here without all of the smaller, finer details. While those are cool, this is the cutscene that tells you what Nomura's current plan is for Kingdom Hearts. As we know, Noctis' signature weapon is the Engine Blade, a sword with an engine for its hilt. This weapon absolutely has a very distinct silhouette and outline, so if we take a look at the sword that Yozora uses, it is basically just a futuristic version of that Engine Blade. Also, one of Noctis' primary abilities is warp striking, allowing him to phase and strike from a distance. When Noctis performs this, it creates a blue phase effect, allowing him to leave behind a blue silhouette of himself. Well, Yozora can perform basically the same ability, though his one is red, allowing him to phase in and out at will. A small detail that I'm noticing here is that blue is the color that is attributed to Noctis, whereas red is the color that's attributed to Yozora. These colors are often thought of as opposites of each other, which the same can be said for both Noctis and Yozora. What's funny though is there is a way for Noctis to perform a red warp strike. There's a DLC weapon in 15 known as Ragnarok, which is one of the strongest weapons in the game, game as it drastically increases the damage of warp strikes. The color palette of this weapon absolutely reminds me of Yozora's sword, but upon equipping this weapon, it will allow Noctis to perform now red warp strikes instead of blue. Another ability that's similar to Noctis's that Yozora can use here is he's able to steal and absorb weapons. During the Yozora fight, if you're snatched out by his sphere attack, he'll steal Sora's Keyblade. This allows him to summon barrages of Keyblades against Sora, which in a way is quite reminiscent of Noctis's Armature, allowing Noctis to summon forth multiple weapons and use them at will. And also, I feel like we're only just scratching the surface when it comes to Yozora's full potential and combat capabilities. What we saw in Kingdom Hearts 3, even though yes, it is the hardest fight in Kingdom Hearts so far, is really just a taste test of what this guy is actually truly capable of. I totally wouldn't be surprised if Yozora actually has a full-blown Armature or Armature Unleashed special attack mode similar to Noctis's that we see in both the Versus XIII trailers and in Final Fantasy XV that Yozora can use. Yozora's eyes can also glow either blue or red depending on what type of attack or ability he's using, much like how Noctis's eyes glow red when summoning. Right now we don't know that much about Yozora's story or his background, but there are some crumbs that do align up with Noctis's. As we know in Final Fantasy XV, Noctis is the heir to the throne, with the bulk of the game revolving around preparing Noctis to take his father's place. The later stage of the game, both chapters 14 and 15, then center around Noctis returning to Insomnia to reclaim the throne and restore the light. This is the game arriving at one of the slogans that was used for Final Fantasy XV, reclaim your throne. So it's interesting when you look at Verum Rex, the video game that Yozora is based on. The Latin meaning of this word means true king. Looking at the back of the case of Verum Rex within Kingdom Hearts 3 can give us a little bit more information on this. Like the blurb up the top, that's the story of the King of Truth, and rather than Final Fantasy XV's Reclaim Your Throne, it's Reclaim Your Heart. In Versus XIII, there was a female character that was going to play a pivotal role in the story, a character who was going to be very important to Noctis, and that was Stella Nox Fleury. She was changed in Final Fantasy XV to a completely different character, Luna Freya, but at least the core purpose remained, a female character that's important to the main protagonist, Noctis, while it's the same for Yozora. The Verum Rex CG cutscene that plays at the beginning of the Toy Story world shows us Quadratum being destroyed by Gigases, with Yozora and his two allies fighting against them. Towards the end of this, we see Yozora trying to save a female character, who unfortunately gets swallowed by the destruction. She very much seems to be Yozora's own version of either Stella or Luna Freya. Yozora reaching out to her in the Verum Rex ad is actually quite reminiscent of the final goodbye cutscene with Luna and Noctis in Final Fantasy XV. Yozora's two allies that can be seen during this cutscene heavily resemble Noctis's group, Prompto, Gladio, and Ignis. Rather than a group of 4 though, this is a group of 3 as Kingdom Hearts always revolves around trios. We actually know the names of both of these characters, as Rex from Toy Story, of all things, actually mentions them. This was during a cutscene that was seen during one of the earlier Kingdom Hearts 3 demos that was removed for the final game. Their names are Magia and Aegis, and I believe that this guy here with the glasses and the greatsword is Aegis, as Aegis literally means protection. We can see that at one point he performs a large shield spell, and this character with the red hair and the hat is Magia, as Magia means trick or magic. We can see him performing a bunch of different spells like thunder or blizzard. Aegis here seems to be a combination of both Gladio and Ignis coming together, with his physical appearance appearing more like Ignis, but wielding a greatsword and taking on the role of protection much like Gladio. And Magia is just straight up Prompto, wearing an outfit that Prompto would absolutely wear, though I will say, there is definitely some suspicious brain similarities when it comes to this character's design. The last connection that people should know between both Noctis and Yozora is the meaning of both of their names. The Latin meaning for Noctis is of night, and the Japanese meaning of Yozora is Night Sky, which is a polar opposite to the meaning of Sora's name, which is just simply sky. A nice little attention to detail piece here is the final world that Sora finds himself in is set during daytime, but the final world that we first meet Yozora in is set at night. So whether it be the blatantly obvious or finer details, it's pretty clear what Tetsuya Nomura is trying to do here. Yozora is undeniably Noctis Lucis Caelum 2.0. I think that Kingdom Hearts 4, or at least the future of Kingdom Hearts revolving around Yozora, will be a way for people to experience some of those original ideas that Nomura had for Versus 13. Obviously though, at the end of the day, this is a Kingdom Hearts game, so the to-be-expected Kingdom Hearts narrative should absolutely be there. I don't necessarily want this to start spinning itself into a Final Fantasy entry, but I am absolutely on board with Nomura repurposing a lot of those ideas he once had for Versus. And honestly, I'm happy that Nomura's found himself in a position where he can do something more with these ideas. Versus 13 truly seems to be something that Nomura just hasn't let go of. An idea that he just so desperately wants to execute, so much so that he starts implementing it into one of his other works. I think that this is genuinely one of the most exciting aspects of Kingdom Hearts 4, to see how far Nomura will go with the Versus 13 integration, but to also just learn more about Yozora in general. This character is still very much clouded in mystery, and it's been like that for the past almost 7 years now since Kingdom Hearts 3 first released. Thank you so much for tuning into today's video. Be sure to slippity slap that like button and subscribe if you haven't already. A big shout out to my wonderful patrons and YouTube members. I appreciate your ongoing support. I hope you're all having a fantastic day, and we'll talk again real soon.